The city of New York is by far the greatest of all. New York City culture is one of relentless ambition, filled with people whose drive knows no limits, and these are their stories. This is New York City Pulse. Hello, New York, and welcome to episode number 6 of New York City Pulse. I'm Zain, and I hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy during these unprecedented times. Normally, these conversations are in person, but to observe the current social distance guidelines, I will be hosting video interviews for the time being. Today, my special guest is Amy Noelle. She's the president of Elevate, which is Manhattan's premier networking community with over $46 million in closed referral business within the group's membership. Amy is also the director of operations for Lend a Hand Uganda, a nonprofit committed to improving the lives of millions of Ugandan children along with their communities. And she leads U.S. benefit strategy at RELX, a global provider of analytics and decision tools for businesses. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Zain. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this interview because, we live in a new world. Everything's done virtually now. We can't host networking events like we used to. Fundraising events are going to be different going forward. And even if you fly all the way around the world, marathons are canceled. So I'm curious to know about, how you're adjusting to the new COVID climate. And I also have several questions about how you've developed throughout your career, specifically with your leadership skills. So to start us off, all of the positions that I mentioned are leadership positions for 3 separate organizations. So were you always a natural leader, or was this a skill set that you've trained over time?
Oh, that's a very good question. That's a good question. I think you're right. In these particular times to kind of, start off with, I think many of us are kind of thrust into unknown situations at this particular moment in time. And we are trying to, scramble, if you will, to try and figure out, yes, how do we maintain being a leader in this particular environment, right? And what do we do and how do we pivot as well? I think that that's kind of critical. So I would say, yes, there's a little bit of me that says, I've always had some kind of leadership that's been, a driving factor and part of who I am. And I've definitely taken time to develop myself and train myself as a leader and be trained, right? So sometimes it's, me reading books or asking questions or, getting coaching from other people. And then there are times where, I have, people who are definitely taking on that either at my request or they just want to make sure that, they give the best for me, right? Where they're starting to provide, training and, classes or direct coaching or, whatever that looks like. So yeah, leadership is definitely something that a lot of people have and is something that we can always be working on, right? I kind of equate, and you'll hear me say this, right? It's a mountain with no top. There is always something else for us to be working on, and leadership is definitely one of those things for sure.
But growing up, like in school, have you noticed that maybe, you would lead teams in group activities, anything like that? Any hint of it
Absolutely. So
growing
I
up?
was the feature baton twirler of the marching band. So I was like right out front and like literally leading the parade. So and I've been a baton twirler since I was 3 years old. I ended up being a world champion baton twirler with my team. I did very well individually, was ranked 4th in the world, so yes, I've had that, kind of leadership quality, I guess, from the very beginning that was trained, from my mother putting the baton in my hand at 3 years old and, teaching me how to just wave it around and then developing, that particular skill over time. And, I was also valedictorian of my graduating college class, so like, I
Where'd
guess,
you go to
even
college?
I went to a small college in Rockland County, New York. It's called Dominican College. I spent 3 years there. I ended up condensing my 4-year program into 3 years, and I don't know, for some reason, I guess I just wanted to fly through it.
Yeah,
But yeah, so I graduated as valedictorian. I
in
would
3 years.
say in three
That's
years.
impressive.
Yeah, I know I'm annoying sometimes. But
What did you study?
I have a degree in mathematics.
Mathematics.
Yeah,
Oh, right. And you were an actuary at one point,
that's
right?
right.
Okay, so
Yes.
that's where the two come in
Hmm.
together. What about in
Yes.
college? Any activities in college where you maybe assumed a leadership role?
Well, I was certainly at that point. So, I mentioned my baton twirling, before at that point, I was kind of coming into my retirement.
Hmm.
And so I took on leadership roles in coaching others, right? So, I had a team that I was the coach of. They did really well. I have some junior Olympians, who I've trained, to win at the Junior Olympics. And, they've also gone on to be, world champions as well. So kind of a very cool thing.
And what do you strive for in the organizations that you have a leadership role in?
Oh, yeah, there's always something to strive for. I think in this particular moment in time, right, I'm really striving for community, right? How do we make sure that we are bringing people together? I wear a lot of different hats. So if I look at myself in the corporate world, right, people think about, working in corporate America, I kind of have a tendency to think, oh, there's so many different silos and everyone has their own opinion and no one can ever agree on anything. And I do think it's my responsibility as a leader to look to see how do we actually bring people together and how do we get to decisions that benefit. And, in this case, what I'm working on are the benefits for the employees. So that's their health care, their insurance, their retirement, their well-being, right? So it's really important right now that we maintain our employees' well-being. I have 30,000 employees around the globe, to kind of make sure that they are, well enough to work, or, and supported enough if they happen to not be well. Making sure that we're continuing to pay everyone, globally, which is, kind of incredible. But yeah, it's looking at, right, how do we bring people together? When I look at, my work in my nonprofit, right, I look at how do
Lend a Hand
I
Uganda.
lend a hand Uganda. That's right. I look at, how do I keep feeding children? We have almost 100 children that we're looking to feed. And normally we feed them when they're at school. But what happens when school closes, right? How do I
Mm.
bring together the team on the ground in Uganda to completely pivot? This is something they've never done before, right? The team understood, okay, we go to the school and we make sure that the kids have someone to cook for them, and we hand out meals that way. But now everyone's locked up in their homes and on lockdown, and how do we make sure that we get food to them still? So I have to train myself as a leader to kind of have the team understand that we can completely pivot and do something we've never ever done before, and lead them through, through the actions that it would take. And I mean, luckily, I have very, very strong team members both here in the U.S. and in Uganda, who have been able to, manage us through that. And we're still continuing every 2 weeks. We drop off new care packages for each of the families that we work with. So none of our kids have gone hungry, which is, nothing short of a miracle.
So especially in hard times, you want to make sure that you're almost like the glue of the organization, keeping
Hmm.
everyone together, making sure that everyone has the support that they need during hard times, especially like right now.
Yep,
So
exactly.
speaking of Lend a Hand Uganda, how did you get involved with Lend a Hand Uganda, and what's sort of the backstory behind it?
Oh, goodness. So the backstory is a friend of mine. Her name is Harriet. She is Ugandan. And she and I were sitting down in a restaurant over cocktails. I think she had wine. I had a cocktail. But she basically was telling me the story about, her country and, where she came from, and the fact that she wanted to do something to help her people. And at one point she's like, these kids, they have no shoes, they wear tattered clothes, and, they just don't have enough to eat, which is just incredible for me to be thinking about, just, given the abundance that we have, here, in the US. And so, she eventually just said, she's like, you're the one who can get this done. And I'm like, I know nothing about Uganda, but okay, we'll figure it out. And so I ended up going with her probably maybe about 6 months after that initial conversation. We talked a little bit, and
Okay,
then
so
she
hold
wanted to
on.
go to Uganda.
Quick question. So
Sure.
before that conversation, how were you two involved that she was able to recognize that you were the right person to lead Lend a Hand?
Oh, yeah. So Harriet and I know each other through our networking group. So through Elevate, I've been a member of that organization for 10 years. And that's allowed me to develop a whole bunch of, relationships with people, both on a personal and professional basis. I know Harriet through our networking group and, just over time. So this was, let's see. So I've been a member for 10 years. Well, it's maybe almost going on 11 years. Actually, yeah, I think it is 11 years. I just did the math in my head. But
So
this was up,
2009.
yeah, 2009. That's right. And this was up in 2014, right? So this was kind of,
When you
5 years
started with Lend a Hand Uganda.
with, yep, exactly. So this is 5 years into, knowing Harriet, on a professional and personal basis. So
Okay.
we had been, kind of friends for 5 years. And then eventually she's like, no, I need to do something. And I think we had gotten to know each other so well at that point that she, had seen my leadership,
Yeah.
through the networking organization. And then also just our personal relationship. She thought that I would be a good person to help.
Okay, so then you got those drinks, and then what happened afterwards?
Right. Then we got on a plane. What's the natural progression, right? And
Straight to
fly
Uganda.
3,000 miles, So yeah, I mean, a very long trip to get there. It takes about a day and a half, but by the time you settle in and the time change and all of that. And yeah, and she took us out and we went to go meet with the families. And I just saw lots of kids. It's interesting, right? Clearly, if you look at my skin, I am not Ugandan, and I'm kind of a novelty, if you will, in Uganda. So I had many, many kids coming up to me, just more just curious about who I was, and they kept kind of trying to rub my skin
Yeah.
because my skin is very different from their skin, and they wanted to I think see if there were any differences. But yeah, everyone just really almost literally embraced me, and I just kind of fell in love with the kids and the area, and knew that I had to do something, to be able to help, because just the way in which the way in which everything is set up in that country, it unfortunately requires outside help. It's different a little bit here, because sometimes I've had the question where people are like, well, why don't you do something closer to home, right? There are people here in New York City, right, who need your help. And yes, I totally, completely agree with that, right? And, I think here in the US, we have a lot of services that are offered, and our challenge is getting those services to the right people, right? So the food banks exist, the education exists, right? But it's just a matter of getting it connected, right? But when we go over to Uganda, that's just not necessarily the case, right? If there's not an outside organization, there's, the education isn't happening, and the food isn't, just isn't available or being, distributed at all, which is just a very confronting thing
Yeah.
that I had to look at while I was there.
Yeah, and it's crazy how, we've advanced so much as a society. I mean, like right now people are talking about blockchain, people are talking about all these different new advances in technology, yet in certain areas of the world, the most basic needs still aren't being met. And so it's great that, organizations like Lend a Hand Uganda are playing an active role in changing communities in those
Yeah.
places.
Yeah. Just to paint a picture on that, right. Most of the kids here in the US are hanging out on Google Classroom or on Zoom classes. My kids are learning via battery powered radios. They don't have electricity in their schools. So school is being delivered over radio. It is vastly different from, how we're coping with our pandemic.
Right. And so what are some of the projects that Lend a Hand Uganda is doing to improve the communities in Uganda?
Yeah, so primarily we have a lunch program, right? So we believe that ending poverty is going to be done. It's a long-term game, and it will be accomplished through education. If the kids can be educated enough such that they're not taken advantage of, right? They know how to look up, basic things like the price, the going rate for ginger, or, whatever it is that they are up to. They know how to maintain do some basic accounting and maintain their books, right? So just, small little things. We're not looking to, produce, every single person in the community must go to college, right? We want everyone to have just some basic education and then, learn some kind of skill along the way. So normally what we do is provide the kids a lunch when they go to school, right? So that's their incentive to actually come to school, because these kids are coming from families that are so poor that they are normally only eating one meal per day. And so by us feeding them at school, right, they actually will be fed. Because when we talk to, it's interesting, when we talk to the parents, and the initial reaction from the parents is like, why do I have to send my child to school? I didn't go to school. I'm fine. Why do I have to send my kid to school? Right. But what they do realize is not being able to provide enough food for their children, right? They want to be eating more and they want their children not to be malnourished. So that's the reason that they're actually sending the kids to school, so that they can learn, which is, just incredible to me. So that's what we normally do. And then around that program, the lunch program, we make sure that the kids are then safe and sanitary at school. So we might also, for example, dig a well to have running water so that we can have clean water to wash our hands and to, make sure that we're cooking with clean water, things like that. We might also build a new latrine so that the kids have a safe and sanitary place to go to the bathroom, right? We just want to make sure that there's no reason that the kids can't come to school. And then we're working with the schools that we're involved with just to make sure that the education is up to standard and that the kids are advancing from one grade to another. Unfortunately, in this particular moment, right, the kids are not in the schools. So what we're doing is we're packing up every 2 weeks. We have boda drivers. Those are guys on mopeds, and they are taking crops from our farm. We grow a lot of the crops that we use for the lunch program on our community farm. And then we send them out to deliver to the different villages and drop off with the parents so that they can pick up, a gift, like a care package, if you will. And that will have, food for 2 weeks. So, things just like staples, mostly potatoes, rice, beans, if we have leafy greens that happen to be harvested at that particular moment in time, we'll include those. So those are the types of things that we're doing. We're, wanting to get back to normal where the kids are learning in the school environment, a little bit more regularly. However, obviously we needed to pivot at this particular time.
So, incentivizing kids to get an education through providing meals directly to the schools, making kids go to school, get a better education. Now they're more, skilled and can go out and improve their lives and quality of life in Uganda. So,
Exactly.
and also clean water. I mean, like, that's a huge thing that we don't even think of a lot of the times. We don't realize how blessed we are to have electricity, to have running water. So it's definitely great that you're doing that in Uganda. So how can people get involved with Lend a Hand Uganda? Tell us a bit more about the lunch program.
Oh, absolutely. So people can go on our website, which is LAHU, stands for Lend a Hand Uganda. So LAHU-USA.org, and can click on the donate button. There we have a lunch program. We are looking for people to sponsor children, right? I said we have almost about 100 students. We're looking to get over that 100 mark. We have about a gap of about 7 kids. So if anyone would like to sponsor a child, we would love to have them participate in our program. The program is $17 a month. So it's just incredible, right? I could feed a child for a whole entire month on $17. And if you think about it, we live in New York City, and I don't know about you, but I've spent $17 on a salad, at Sweetgrains. So, but I can use that for a whole entire month, whereas that's, maybe one meal that I eat at home, which I'm doing now anyway. So we would love for more people to get involved.
Another avenue that Lahu has for raising money is hosting events like fashion events, poker nights. But, when gatherings like those are prohibited, how do you plan on adjusting to that?
So we're starting to talk about this now. So right now we're doing our online campaign, which we do every year anyway. So we lucked out that the first half of our year is mostly online anyway. So we, look for donors. We, set up campaigns on Facebook, so like we're doing what we need to do. And luckily right now we are not at a shortage of donors. Our donors are continuing to participate in our program and are not saying that they can no longer participate for financial reasons, which is, again, just absolutely incredible. Where we might have a concern is coming up to the fall. So normally in October, we do poker night. And so there are usually about 100 people gathered in a room in New York City. And that is usually towards the end of October. Maybe I'm, being naive. I'm kind of hopeful that we might get to, by that particular time in the year, a place where we can have that many people, though I do have to plan for the contingency, right? And, we started this conversation talking about leadership, right? It would be irresponsible of me to just kind of keep pushing forward that is our only option and we must have poker night, because that's where we generate most of our revenue for the year, which is, a little bit crazy, but we are looking at potential alternatives. So one thing would be to have our poker night be much smaller, right? Maybe much more exclusive, raise the buy-in and, go after, a particular clientele. We have developed over time, a very long list of poker players, and, we might talk to some of them and see, if we could have, 2 different poker nights potentially, or, just change the format a little bit. The other thing that we're looking at, we might try it out maybe over the summer, is to do an online auction, right? So is there an opportunity for us to find something that our donors would be, interested in, right? And kind of they get a benefit of, having a product or service, and then also know that portion of those proceeds go to the organization. So we're considering that as well. But the team is, meeting and trying to figure out what those kinds of alternatives are. We have, a little bit of time before we need to make that final decision of whether we can or cannot have an in-person event. But yeah, it's interesting conversations to have at this point.
Yeah, so you're staying optimistic, but preparing to adjust if needed.
Exactly.
Okay, and so from sort of a bigger picture, between your 3 positions, how has the way that you've operate changed from before COVID to now? Everything's at home. What's your routine like?
Oh, that's a good question, right? Yeah. So I now live inside this little box.
Right.
And I basically go from morning until night inside this little box. I feel like I'm a TV star now. It's very exciting. But yeah, it's interesting though, because yes, you could say that life looks very different. However, I would have work from home days before all of this happened, right? So I was, while I had an office to go to, and still technically have, but, I would take advantage of flexibility to be able to work from home, which allows me to manage multiple things throughout my day. I know a lot of people talk about work-life balance. I tend to talk about work-life integration, because I don't know that there's necessarily a balance to actually find, because some days are going to be work heavy, some days are going to be personal heavy, some days will be charity heavy, right? And all of those things still need to be able to coexist and integrate with one another. So I've always been a proponent of work from home. So it's just now it's 100% instead of 40%, right? So it does.
Do you prefer it this way?
There's pros and cons, right? So I can, wear yoga pants every day, that's a plus, but, but yes, while I love the interaction here on a screen, at the end of the day, my eyes are, super tired, and, I just want to be able to shut everything off and, curl up in bed sometimes,
Yeah.
right? Whereas if I had that more personal interaction, to be able to look someone in the eye, that might be a little bit different. However, I don't think I've lost a ton of productivity, working in this virtual format, 100%. I think that we can still, for the most part, as long as we pivot ourselves just a little bit, and maybe our expectations, or, what it is, how it is that we go about doing our work, I think we can still be, as effective as we were before. And again, I do recognize that's from my, privilege of being able to have, work that I could do in a virtual format, right? That's not the same everywhere. Obviously your, profession relies very much on,
Right.
A physical, seeing people and watching their reaction as they're viewing their new home,
Yeah.
so it's very different.
And so when you're not inside this little box here, how are you spending your time? Are you, I don't know, going on runs? Are you watching movies? Are you reading?
Yes, all of those, right? So I bought myself an under desk treadmill. So I've been trying to walk a little
Is
bit.
that one of those like standing desks where you walk
Mm-hmm.
while you work?
Yes, exactly, exactly. So I have my laptop propped up
Are you
on a
using it
tall
now?
desk. I'm not walking
Oh,
now,
oh,
no,
but
but
you're
I'm just
standing on it.
standing. Yes,
Got it.
exactly. But then, in between meetings, I turn it on just so that I get, because normally I live in New York City and my step count is through the roof because we just walk everywhere, or at least
Mm-hmm.
I do. And so yeah, I've been feeling a little lazy, but yes, I do try and get out for a run. I had been training for a half marathon, as you know, back in early late February, early March. I was in Paris to run the Paris half marathon, and then they canceled it. So we, kind of came back right before the pandemic really started to hit in New York City. Although now we're finding out that it was probably in New York City already, at that time when we were flying, which is a scary thing to consider. But anyway, I am trying to not lose out on my training. Here's another optimistic thing. They've rescheduled the half marathon for
Good.
September 6th. So I'm like, do I dare get on a plane and get myself to Paris? I'm probably 50-50 at this point, but trying to keep up in my training. I have also though been doing like online yoga classes and boot camps and dance classes. And so keeping my fitness up, but still, I guess that's still in the little box. Outside of the box, I'm working on a puzzle. Yeah, I think it's like 1,500 pieces. It's a lot. So
What's it a puzzle for?
it's a puzzle of Neuschwanstein's castle in
Okay.
Germany. And so, just putting all the little pieces together. There's just a small section at the bottom that is all like greenery, like, the trees. And so
Yeah, good
every
luck with
single
that.
piece, yeah, every single piece looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's a little banana town. But I've been saying when I finish the puzzle, that means quarantine's over.
Oh, good. Good. So hurry,
So I know I need to get,
right when we get off the call, go back to the puzzle, finish the puzzle quickly so we can go back to
I
our
know.
daily routine.
Because I've been working on it for 7 weeks. I mean, obviously not consistently,
Right.
but
Yeah.
when I need an hour just to do something, away from the screen.
Gotcha. What are you looking forward to the most after COVID? Like, what's the first thing that you do when this is over?
Oh, I need to hug people. I'm a hugger, and that's just been really, really hard. Even though I have, from time to time seen people, in real life. My brother lives nearby, my sister lives not too far, so we have had some interactions, with family members. But yeah, I just, I really do miss just being able to actually touch people. I know that sounds a little strange, but I'm going to start hugging people again.
Yeah, you miss
I
the
know.
human to human interaction, which we don't really get
Exactly.
much of anymore,
Yep.
except for virtually, which I mean,
Mhm.
thank God we have Zoom. Can you imagine doing this without Zoom, without
Oh,
technology?
no, no, no. We would all be, I guess, hermits and yeah, very isolated, and yeah, it would not be good.
Okay. And is there anything that you'd like to raise awareness for? Anything that that you're working on now that you'd like to promote?
Well, I mean, I guess the only other thing that we really haven't talked much about is, our networking group. And right, it really is an opportunity for people who are either looking for a job in this state, in this moment in time, or are having a business, whether that business is successful or has, no income coming in, right? I would invite people to come and, visit with us, right? We've waived all of our visitor fees. So it is an online format. We have over 100 people joining each and every week. So people are, getting together, and they're sharing about their business, and they're talking about who they want to meet. And those interactions are actually happening, right? We've been saying a stat since the last time we met over 2 months ago. So when we've been completely in this virtual format, we've still been able to pass $1.5 million in closed business to each other. So there's a lot of business out there, and we need to get people connected to that business. So I would encourage people to, come and join us on a Wednesday morning. You can do it from within your pajamas, and try to, look for business opportunities or potential, new employment. opportunities. So I would invite people to come, right? Our website is whyelevate.nyc, and why is the question, WHY, elevate, ELEVATE.NYC. We meet every morning, or every Wednesday morning, excuse me, from 7 to 9. So yeah, people should come.
There we go. And this goes back to what you were saying earlier about connecting people and making sure that they have the support that they need, because I mean, Elevate does have a lot of support. It's great to, have people that we can just text and have an answer right away, and get the guidance that we need. So it's definitely very helpful. And yeah, I also encourage people to come Wednesday morning, 7 a.m.
Yeah.
Final question, Amy. Are you ready? Final question.
Okay.
Finish this sentence. Amy Noelle is...
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about leadership, right? So Amy Noelle is a leader. However, I consider myself a leader who causes other people to also be leaders. So I'm a leader causing leaders.
A leader growing leaders. All righty. And with that, we'll end. Amy, thank you for coming on the show, and we will see you on the next episode.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.